Hello, class, and welcome to our reading review of what the numbers show about NFL player arrests, with a focus on specific strategies the essay is using to demonstrate that rhetorical awareness. And when we look at these essays through the lens of rhetorical analysis, we can best understand how the rhetorical strategies that they're using, we can also include in our own essays as well. So ideally, the argument, right, has a very straightforward title, what the numbers show about NFL player arrests. And I think that the notion of showing is meant to grab your attention and demonstrate how important these numbers are. Remember, factual arguments, when you're citing numbers, make sure you put those in quotes as well, numbers from your sources as well as words. And you'll notice that this essay does a nice job of using visuals as well to further elucidate the argument, right? To show it. And very effective strategy. So off the field violence by professional football players is coming under new focus this week after the release of a video involving a star Baltimore Ravens running back, Ray Rice, followed by a bungled response by the National Football League. So they start with some background information, just like your intro paragraph should, on the subject and topic. But what do the numbers show about NFL players' tangles? Notice how they use the apostrophe correctly because it's a plural noun ending in S. So you just put the apostrophe after plural nouns ending in S. Notice the use of the rhetorical questions here to help persuade the reader to think about different aspects of the topic. And then again, as a good academic argument does, they then proceed to answer those questions that are raised with specific, right, factual evidence. And that's what an academic argument is. Remember, carefully structured research. So in our own academic arguments, we want to make sure we carefully structure our research as well. Notice, right, that the topic sentence of this paragraph lets us know that it's going to focus on USA Today's and the database of arrests, charges, and citations, right? All examples, which examples is it going to focus on, right? There's 713 instances. Now you'll notice these paragraphs, as is the case when essays appear on websites, are usually shorter because they want to make sure that they don't lose your attention, because the more views they get, the more money they get. So in your essays, you want to make sure that your paragraphs are well developed, and a good number of sentences for each body paragraph is 7 to 10 minimum. Remember, you're not going to lose your reader's attention in an academic argument because that's what we're looking for, that carefully structured research as readers. So what you can see here is how these details and facts and examples are arranged. There's obviously the picture for that kind of emotional appeal. So they've cited USA Today, Ethos, a reputable source. The data set is imperfect. Notice the use of the semicolon correctly here to separate two sentences. And when the second sentence starts with a transitional word or phrase, you put a comma after that. After all, it depends on news media outlets finding out about every time a third string offensive lineman is pulled over for drunk driving. And so some arrests may well may fall through the cracks. Again, if you're not familiar with football, third string means the third player on the depth chart. So they might not necessarily report all of the players, especially the unpopular ones, on the news media. So again, the data set is imperfect. They're looking at it from a Rogerian strategy. But what is clear is the data that is reported is very telling. Moreover, our arrests are included even if the charges are dropped or if the player is found not guilty. So presumably includes legal run-ins in which the player did nothing wrong. So this kind of qualifies the data and lets its readers know from a Rogerian standpoint that there are other perspectives on this issue. Again, showing that the writer appears fair, and you also want to incorporate Rogerian strategy in your essays. Finally, for purposes of these tabulations, a simple drug possession charge in which no one was hurt counts the same as a case like that of Mr. Rice, who is on tape punching his fiancee out cold, she is now his wife, or even that of the former New England Patriot Aaron Hernandez, who is in jail awaiting trial on murder charges. But with those caveats, right? A caveat is kind of an exception. Aside, here's what the data show about how pro football players are interacting with the law. And as I always suggest, and forgive me for not having dictionary.com set up already, but you always want to be aware of words that you might not know the definitions of, so that you can look them up quickly. And the beauty of the internet, we have dictionaries at our fingertips, right? A warning or caution, right? So it's kind of right, a legal note to a court to suspend certain proceedings until the notifier is given a hearing. So it's kind of an exception in some ways from a legal standpoint, right? So what they're saying is that after you take those cautions aside, right, the issues that are imperfect about it from a legal standpoint, but now here's what the data shows, right? The numbers show a league in which drunk driving arrests are a continuing problem, and domestic violence charges are surprisingly common. Very specific and relevant examples, just as you want to do in you want to include in your body paragraphs. Nice use of the semicolon as well. And in which teams with the highest arrest rates tend to stay that way over time. Nice use of the semicolon to separate the list of 3 or more, right? When there's internal punctuation, internal ideas, you want to have that pause between them. If you remember in our semicolon rules, there's 2 main rules for the semicolon. And again, it comes between complete sentences when you want the reader to pause like a comma, but you don't necessarily need that coordinating conjunction. Notice the graph here, the visual argument in terms of when the arrests are peaking. So now you'll notice each of the topic sentences is in bold, right? And then they explain, right, that idea specifically with relation to the purpose and what the numbers, right? So 1 NFL player in 40 is arrested in a given year, right? Just as you want to comment on your quotes and data that you are including, they do a very nice job of explaining how this, right, demonstrates to us the focal point, and that it's a big problem. So, and the data, right, is unpacked and analyzed and evaluated. Arrests peaked in the mid 2000s and are way down this year, right? In other words, we don't know for sure whether more are being arrested in those years or whether TMZ and other outlets were better positioned to find out about it. So again, they're looking at the chart and analyzing the details. And again, very, very specific in terms of which types of arrests and specifically how those problems are indicative of bigger issues with the league. So again, I think that this does a good job of presenting the ideas in such a way and illuminating the topic of each of the paragraphs in bold, just as your topic sentences should also illuminate the topic of your paragraph, and ideally it would come in the beginning of your paragraph. So as they continue to kind of look at each of these facts, it's very specific in terms of the conclusion. And with your conclusions, remember, you want to repeat your point and review your support and then reflect on the bigger picture. So I think that they do a nice job in the last 3 paragraphs, right? The data doesn't tell us anything about why these patterns are so persistent, but there are 2 possibilities that seem to stand out. First, there could be club culture, right? Meaning the culture of a particular team. And second, the idea of geography. So notice they review their main points, right? Different cities have different patterns of living and different approaches to law enforcement, right? And again, this notion of stereotyping, or perhaps in some cities, young African-American men driving expensive cars attracting more police attention than others, right? Regardless of the reasons, a handful of franchises have persistently higher numbers of players who end up being arrested and may want to learn from their rivals in other cities as to why. So geography, right, and club culture are two things that we should continue to analyze and think about with regard to giving attention to hopefully preventing these arrests to improve our, not just the club culture of the team and the environments in the cities in which the arrests are happening, but overall culture and society, right? Again, as we say continually in our conclusions, you want to reflect on the purpose of the writing and bring it back to life. And quite simply, what do we learn about life? So hopefully this video review was helpful, and yet another instance where we could see how identity and stereotyping could play a role in this particular issue being examined in this document. So thanks for watching and listening. As always, let me know if you have any questions.